I've watched a little bit of stuff. I've watched your roundtables with Joe and Becca. I thought those were fun. I like what you're doing there. I don't think so, Jesse. I have a tendency to just walk in and see what we're doing.
Um, what I typically like to do is capture somebody's. Well, I'll just go ahead and do this. Let's kick this thing off.
That's perfect.
Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents Channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's interview, I'm going to be talking with Mark. We know each other professionally, but we've begun having some one-on-one conversations. And as per the usual, I like to record as early as someone is willing to share about their infinite banking journey as I'm asking questions and learning more about them. So I'm very glad that Mark joined us for today's episode, and I hope that you enjoy. All right, Mark, I think that it's really neat that you said, yes to me to record our second conversation. We had our very first one-on-one conversation the other day on the phone. I'm taking a break from meetings. I'm in between meetings and talking with you on the phone for the first time one-on-one. We've had multiple, I guess I actually looked this up the other day, probably half of a year now. So something like 6 months, we've been in some of the same professional circles, and we've been in that setting, participating in conversations. And of course, one thing that in that setting sticks out to me was your willingness to participate, your consistency in showing up and things like that. And you just became a person of interest to me. And I asked to have a phone call with you and get to learn more about you. Because when you're sitting across, that virtual table with somebody, you get curious about, well, what do they have going on in their lives? How did they get here to where they're at? So if you'll let me, and you've already said yes graciously, and I appreciate it, let's just continue that conversation that we've already started by fleshing out your origin story for me. So I was asking more about, who you are and where you're from and family and, how you came to know infinite banking and apply it in your life. And you're a professional in the space. And again, that's how we met each other. So if you would just take me back to your Mark from Texas. All right. Mark Leach from Texas. Now I'll say this. I might dip into my Scottish accent, or my best Scottish accent that I could produce, just because we were talking even ancestry the other day and on the phone, and I thought about that on the drive in today. It's like, well, I might throw a Scottish accent and make him laugh. But yeah, tell us a bit about who you are.
Well, great, Jesse. It's just really an honor and a privilege to be here. Yeah, we've been hanging out in the same professional group, mostly via Zoom for, at least half a year. But just recently started having our one-on-one conversations. So it's just a blessing and to be with you today and to just go over what we're doing, because I really believe that iron sharpens iron. So I'm looking forward to this interaction and even our future as colleagues together. So, like Jesse mentioned, I am from West Texas. If you don't know, that's kind of up in the Panhandle area, and I do have some Scottish ancestry way back. But I'm afraid if I tried a Scottish brogue, it would have a West Texas twang. So I probably won't go there. But it's good to be, at a place where we can visit on colleague levels, and I hope the people watching this are encouraged. If nothing else, be encouraged to pursue your own financial destiny. That's my word right now, because there's been parts of my life where I pursued it and parts where I haven't. Because I'm 65 years old, so I've got a track record, some better than others. So I hope that people can learn from that, from the good and the bad. So I started out, I've lived in Plainview, Texas. That's my actual hometown all my life. My family's been here since 1887. So we have a lot of roots here. My wife's family's been here about that long as well. So we went to Texas Tech, and then we came back home and we started farming. And so that's my original business background, was being raised on a farm, agriculture, agribusiness, and we broke that out into several others. And we did that for many years. But then when I was about 40, I felt a call into the ministry. So I did that for a few years, was a pastor at a local church. And then the Lord led me back to into business again, specifically this business of being an insurance agent. It wasn't with an IBC content at first. That came later. And I learned about that through my son, who had found a book about it, and also from a dear friend and now colleague, Becca Wilhite. And I know she's been on Jesse's show before. We actually do some work together with businesses. So that's kind of my journey to how I got here. And now I'm trying to focus 100% on the infinite banking concept. So I'm a relative newcomer to that part of my business, but it's where I've found the most pleasure, and I think where I can help the most people, because that's really my heart, is to help people. Okay.
I love it. So tell me this, what was it that you farmed? What was it that you did when you started in on that farming career back home?
Oh, great. Well, I just kind of picked up, where my family was already at, and picked up some of that. And I farmed family land, and we did all kinds of crops. I think I counted up, and one time I had grown 24 different crops, from vegetables to just your normal cotton and corn crops. One of the most interesting things we did, we started a company that grew Indian corn, pumpkins, all the things you see in the farmer's market, craft stores, grocery stores in the fall. So we specifically did that, and that was really a value added proposition to our farm. It generated a lot of cash flow. We had quite a few employees. But it was seasonal. We were super busy in the fall during harvest time, as you might expect. But we ended up growing that thing and shipping product to about 30 states.
Very cool, very neat. And I'm remembering some of our first conversation by you saying that some former generations, multiple generations, if I remember correctly, had been farming in that area, right?
Oh yes, yeah. My son he farms all the family land now, and he's fifth generation.
Fifth generation. I love that. That is so cool. So did you handed over the reins, so to speak, when you started in on the ministry, when you started in on your insurance journey? Which part?
So kind of in between there. He was 13 when I did that, so he wasn't quite old enough, obviously, to take over the farm. So he went to school uh, for ag, and then he came home and started farming.
That is so neat. Fifth generation in that area and farming. I love that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't have expected that diversity of the crops. I mean, I'm not a farmer. We have a homestead, so we've got and had, livestock over the years, and vegetable gardens and herb gardens and native plant gardens and different things. But I've not been a large scale farmer by any means. So that actually impresses me, the variety of things that you grew, and that's just what sticks out to me. It's neat. So tell me a bit about that. And I knew that you were a fellow believer, but we didn't cover that you'd been a pastor for some time as well. So I guess what I wonder, because I've had previous careers as well. I was in law enforcement right out of college for several years. And then I made a transition into government education. I was a public high school teacher, right? So I've had a trajectory as well and done other things. Been a landscaper, worked in direct sales. But I guess I wonder, where you're at in a journey, typically, and for me, I look back and just kind of wonder how the dots connected me or helped me. Was there a burning bush here? Like because I know I can use that kind of language with you. Was there a burning bush here? Was there a mountaintop experience here? Was there a valley, here that, kind of got me to where I'm at? So maybe when you reflect back on those farming years, maybe when you reflect back on those ministry years, I don't know, do you see any dots connecting, or what sticks out to you as we sit down today? We're going to talk about infinite banking, but what were some things maybe that happened to you, or that helped you, or I don't know, that maybe connect? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I can now I can tie the dots together. When you're going through them, the dots look really random, and they look even not only random, but they look far apart. Like, oh my gosh, how is this ever gonna sort out? But hindsight's beautiful, and so some of the dots could have been closer, some of them, but it works out if you're strong and faithful, and trying to follow the Lord to the best of your ability. So we were having um, some struggles back in my 30s, marriage wise, family wise, things like that. And that's where the Lord really came in and shored that up to the point, without going into too much detail, to the point where we just really felt called to share what the Lord had done with us to other people. So it really turned into a mission to help people. And we felt very called to do that locally. Okay. Not start a big international ministry or anything like that. We definitely believe in acting locally. Okay. You know, we may pray globally, but we like to act locally. So we did that for about 20 years, close to uh, different positions, different church, but we were with one church and we're still with that church as members. And we watched it grow from a church plant, a new church, grow significantly to the point it is now, especially for our small community. So then, after retiring from the ministry, I still wanted something to do, but my heart was still to help people. And through some dots of from friends, okay, that connected via the insurance industry, and really realizing I'm still helping people. So, and now that has transitioned. The dot there is transition from just regular life insurance, to infinite banking, to really impacting them not almost momentarily, but lifelong.
Okay, okay. So help me make sure that I've got this right. Did you go full steam from farming full time into ministry full time without farming, or is there some blending there at that transition?
I went full time. I sold all my equipment, all my related businesses, kept the land for future generations, as we see now. And but no, we just left it wholesale. So
Okay, okay. What's the term for that? So you let the land go fallow? Is that me remembering the a proper term? You kept the land, so you got rid of the.
no, we always want our land to be producing. It's like a rent house. If it's empty, it falls into disrepair. And land's the same way. It has to be husbanded. It has to be taken care of. It has to be worked and managed, just like our financial life. So because my son wasn't old enough yet, we let other farmers in the area manage that for us and take care of the land.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you kept the land, but you didn't just let it be dormant. You had some use going to it, and other people were able to benefit and use it. But you kept it for the beautiful. Awesome. So it eventually made the transition into your son, who is working it full time now. Okay, so then from ministry into insurance, paint that picture for me. You're in ministry. How do you get into insurance? What happened there in life?
Well, so a friend of mine who was also a pastor had started with this uh, group that helps you get into the industry. And so he recruited me to get into that group. And I did the training, I took the testing to get licensed in all the states I wanted to get licensed in. And he kind of mentored me along. I've had some good friends that have been doing it a little bit longer than I have, and they've mentored me. And so it was really just a relational way of doing it. It wasn't as transactional. Of course, there were transactions involved, but it was more relational than it was anything else.
Yeah, insurance is so very much a people business, a relationship business in its broadest sense. Yeah, absolutely. So how do you reflect then? Because we'll get dialed in on infinite banking here, but I still want to keep it broad at okay, how long were you in insurance in general? How do you reflect back on that time? And you still do general insurance things, if I'm not mistaken. You're really, you know, working on and developing, and again, we're in the same mastermind, so I know that you're actively helping people with becoming their own banker, implementing infinite banking in their lives. But you've got a pretty broad range of relationships with people for different reasons. Is that right? But you describe it. I'm not trying to say. I want you to answer.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm still doing other types of primarily life insurance. for different needs and reasons that people have, whether that's protecting a mortgage or thinking about final expenses at the end of life to take care of their loved ones. There's many reasons people get life insurance, just like there's many reasons that people go with infinite banking. So yeah, I'm kind of straddling both worlds, but there's a ton of overlap there too, because there's so many reasons. It's not like you're wearing a lot of different hats. You're going to wear the same hat, but you have to be aware of what people's needs are. And one of the way that I do that is by identifying what they perceive as a problem they're trying to solve. Let's face it, most people get, quote, insurance because they're trying to mitigate a risk, or in other words, solve a potential problem. Okay, like right now, there's a bunch of wildfires out in California. Well, hopefully, most of those people were able to insure their homes to mitigate that risk. It's not something they wanted to do, but that's where life insurance differs. We know that everyone has a life expectancy. So we're not trying to mitigate the risk of death with whole life. Now, I'm not talking about term life, but with whole life, we're not trying to mitigate that loss. We're trying to make that where our families and our legacy can be in good shape. And in the meantime, through infinite banking, we're able to live a successful life, however we decide to define that, okay, financially. So that's why I like the infinite banking. I like being able to come in there and help people with their situations.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I'm going to pull the reins back a little bit if I can, because I'm still very curious about. Tell me again, how long were you in insurance before you were exposed to infinite banking? Can you remember that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I got licensed. I'm say it's coming up on 4.5 years now that I've been doing it. And I first got wind of and started thinking about infinite banking probably 2.5, maybe 3 years ago now. And I've been a Nelson Nash practitioner with the Nelson Nash Institute for 1 year. So it's been a progression, of learning and believing, and then education, and then becoming a practitioner. So
Well, a couple of years is something, right? A couple of years in the traditional insurance space, even if it is particularly towards life insurance, is something. So I guess I wonder, okay, tell me maybe how you were exposed to infinite banking, because you're a couple of years in the business, you're doing insurance, and you are exposed to infinite banking. So number one, paint that picture of you are confronted with the idea that you could become your own banker somehow. So I want you to describe that. And then maybe the next thing I'd like to ask is, what traditional things from personal finance or the traditional business of insurance did you maybe have as conflicts with this exposure to being able to become your own banker? Or maybe what helped you? Conflicts or what helped you? So just describe that exposure. How did it happen?
sure, that's a great question. So, like I mentioned, my exposure was my son had heard a little bit about it because he's in farming, like I said, and farming requires a lot of capital, and most farmers have to go to the bank for their capital. So that piqued his interest. He said, Dad, what's this about? So we started having that conversation. And then simultaneously, Becca had started learning about it. So I started listening to her, and she started turning me on to some different podcasts and things that I could learn from. And so that was what began my education process. And I'll be real honest with you, I wasn't sure it was even legit at first. I went down that road of, oh, this can't be right. It's smoke and mirrors. So that leads me on to my own journey of discovery. And I think everybody needs that journey of discovery, whether that's through another person or your own research. I'm meeting with a guy tonight who reached out to me because of Nelson Nash Institute and me being on there. And he's already read the book. He said, I've listened to this one person, 100 of their podcasts. So, we're coming into that meeting because he did his own work. And that's what I recommend for everybody. So I did that too. But I will say this, I'm not near arrived. I'm still learning. That's what I love about it. As far as conflict with the other part of my life insurance business, there is some things that I have shied away from in that world. Now it hasn't been anything with uh, whole life, but this is me talking. My opinion is that IULs don't make for a good product to use for infinite banking. Sure, you can build a cash value, but it's not guaranteed. Okay. So there's where we run into the rub there. So I stay away from that. What I typically sell in my other part of my insurance business is a term life product. And then we have the conversation of would whole life work for them? And then maybe we work into an IBC conversation, you know. Kind of just depends on what their needs are. Because again, I'm trying to help people with their perceived needs.
I love it. So I want to go into that part of the conversation. We can talk product. We can talk whatever you want. I have some things that I'm curious about, of course, but I'm trying to lay some groundwork here so that we can have those types of discussions by folks, getting to know who you are while I'm getting to know more about who you are. So flesh that part of the story out for me then, where was your son, I think you said your son was exposed to the book. Was that the content that he was exposed to? Was the Becoming Your Own Baker book itself?
Actually, no, he was exposed. A friend of his told him about Mary Jo Ehrman's book, Farming Without the Bank. Okay, so that was his exposure, was Farming Without the Bank by Mary Jo.
And she's great. She's a titan in the space. I love listening to her stuff. She'll talk, fervently about her German attitude and demeanor, and it's a lot of fun. But she's doing really, really, really big things with different people, but particularly, yeah, farmers, ranchers, because that's where she's from, and those are her kind of people, and she has knowledge and experience there. So, okay, all right, so that makes sense to me. Obviously, her message got to him. He's running the business, so he's realizing, yeah, need for capital, and farmers are going to banks, like everybody is, but farmers are no different. They need capital to be able to run the business. So, okay, so what were those first conversations with him like then? What did he say? What do you remember? What did you question? How much did he catch on to the idea? Did he implement it then after you vetted it more? What did that look like?
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you, we didn't talk about it really for a while. He just kind of told me about it, and then I dove off and started doing my own research and listening to podcasts, listening to friends. I went to the Nelson Nash Institute think tank a year before I even became a member. That was part of my check it out process, was actually being around the people that do this, that promote it, that live it day to day. So, I did what I consider a pretty heavy vetting by literally going to meet the people. And so he and I didn't talk about it much until I like trying to get my ducks a little bit in a row before we pull the trigger on anything. But once we did, he and I and his wife, who's a very huge part of their business and business decisions, sat down and talked about it some. And I guess they've had a policy about a year and a half now. They're still in the capitalization phase, building their reserves. I don't think to this point they've even taken a loan yet. So they're fairly infant in it, and they're learning as we go. We're fixing to have I try to have reviews with my farmers about once a year. Most of them, even if they got their policy in the middle of the summer, they want to talk in the spring when they've got the other crop out, and so on and so forth. So we try to use policies that allows them to put PUA in at any time of the year to fit their cash flow, not the insurance companies. So we're still a work in progress when it comes to all that. So we've got several annual reviews to get done coming up. So
I love it. That's very helpful for me. Okay, because you're already describing, some of what your client interaction is like. Again, I'm still pulling back the reins. I'm making mental notes of all these things. I'm like, oh, it'd be interesting to talk with him about that. Oh, I want to talk with Mark about this. Okay, so your son and his wife, they're in the capitalization phase. Beautiful. I mean, and some people, I will say this on that point right now while it's on my mind, Mark, that it's really easy to overlook the power of simply building capital that you can have access to. Now, I used my first policy year one. I had something that I hit the ground running with, which was paying off some debts, right? I had student loans, I had a car note, credit cards, things like that. I paid what was for me a significant premium right away when I got my first policy so that I could make significant policy loans to begin paying off those things in my life. But that's not everybody's trajectory. That's not everybody's need. Like you were saying, like everybody's an individual. They have their needs. And we know that it's easy for us because of human nature to overlook the power of capitalizing. But it's Nelson's second principle, don't hesitate, don't be afraid to capitalize. So in my mind, when you say, yeah, they've been capitalizing for a year and a half, I'm thinking, woohoo. I'm thinking fantastic. That's awesome. So I wanted to mention that. Go ahead.
Jesse, now that this last crop year's over, I don't know what they're going to do because we haven't talked about what their plans are, but now they have the opportunity during this policy year, because they started a year ago summer, and to put in the PUA they felt like they can after this last crop. So this will be their second capitalization phase. So I wouldn't be surprised that after the second capitalization phase, maybe they do consider a loan for this particular crop year. Their options are much more open than they were a year ago.
Yeah, that second year of capitalizing definitely makes a difference for sure. And that's a worthy point. See, you're getting me into the nuts and bolts of it, but I love it. The flexibility is so huge. I was on the phone a day or two ago, just this week, with an individual, and she has this plan of, okay, in 6 months, 7 months, I'm going to be paying for this trip. I want to take me, my sister, and our aunt on this trip. And it's a beautiful thing that she's doing, really cool. And she's wanting to pay for it, right? So she's talking with me about paying extra PUAs into her policy, building up capital for the thing that she's going to finance, which is this trip. And she sent, her email to the company. She contacted the company to find out, okay, how much extra can I pay this month? I want to pay some extra. And she's getting back with me saying, Jesse, is that for the year or just this month? It was because it was a big number. There was a lot of flexibility there, is what I'm trying to describe, on when she could pay that PUA, how much extra PUA she could pay. And again, when you look at whole life insurance as a private banking entity, that flexibility is so important, because you might have high income earning months, you might have low income, no income earning months, right? Like you were talking about the farming business earlier, pumpkins, those are really popular at like one time of the year, and that's it. And it can be a big deal, but it's just that one time of the year. So the flexibility of being able to pay extra premiums, and when you could pay extra premiums because you're treating this policy like a private banking entity, it's really important, and people value that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's part of knowing who your clients are, because that's been my whole life, is understanding farming and the things that go into it. I'm just drawn to that. And consequently, because my ultimate goal is to help people, not just my family, that leads me into helping people that I understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to talk more about that. So, okay, so your son has somebody reach out to him, Mary Jo Ehrman, Farming Without the Bank. She's got a podcast also called Without the Bank, because she works with entrepreneurs and business owners in general, but farmers and ranchers. That's in your wheelhouse as well, down in Texas where you're at. Although you can do work all across the country. I'm not trying to pigeonhole you to the Republic of Texas, sir. But I'm curious then, okay, you said that Becca also proactively began to reach out to you about Infinite banking, or was it just insurance at that time? What? All right, so you're hearing things from your son. You begin your own research into infinite banking. And I want to go back to you going to a think tank. Did I hear you right? You went to a think tank before you ever owned a policy that was built for infinite banking?
That's correct. Becca was about a year ahead of me on her learning curve. And so she had already known about Nelson Nash. And I went to one 2 years ago as her guest. And that was the year she became an authorized practitioner. So yeah, I went as her guest, and it was awesome. That was the last one they had, which in Birmingham, Alabama, the home of Nelson Nash.
Very cool. All right, so tell us a little bit, because you're right. You said it earlier. We have had Becca on the show multiple times. Love Becca. She's a wealth of knowledge. She's a published author in the space. How do y'all know each other?
Oh gosh, we've known each other. I'll tell all our ages almost. So when she was a college basketball player. So she came to Wayland Baptist University, which is our university here in our hometown of Plainview, and she came there and ended up coming to church with us and just became like a daughter in our house. So we worked at the same church together for years. We have just been family friends for a long, long time. I'm probably, we calculated it not long ago, close to 30 years we've known each other.
Very cool. So what was that conversation like then when you decide to leave Texas and go to Birmingham, Alabama to see more about this concept for yourself? Because I agree with you. That's a much higher threshold of a vetting process than many people do. People that are clients even of mine, right? But it's a substantial vetting process that you did, it sounds like. So tell me more about that vetting process. Tell me more about, what the think tank did for you. How soon did you get in the book? What sticks out to you from the book? Were there other resources, podcasts, people, professionals that influence you for you to actually say, I want to do this in my personal life?
Yeah, great questions, all of them. So I had already read the book before I went to Birmingham. I wasn't clueless, but it did, and that was the only book I had read was Nelson's book. Well, I take that back. I had read Mary Jo's book as well, which is a real piggyback on Nelson's work. So, but it's just a little more specific, a little bit more focused on a certain industry. So that was really not too hard of a decision to decide to go. I felt like that was a relatively cheap investment to get started before I went all in on the concept, but not just the concept, promoting the concept. Because let me say this, a lot of my clients are what we call warm market people I already knew because I've been around a long time and know a lot of people just because of that. And so I wasn't willing to get somebody I might see at the grocery store into something that I didn't believe in. So it was part of a believing process for myself. And I also believe that the best way to do that is go straight to the source. And so that was what kind of prompted me to go there. I can listen to all the podcasts, listen to Becca, listen to whomever, but I had to come up with my own conclusion. They convinced me enough to get to the source.
I love that. I love that. The book, Mary Jo's book, the think tank, going right to the source, that's super valuable. Your long relationship with Becca prior played a role. She invited you there. I love that. That made me have a couple of questions. I'm struggling with which one to go with first. So because you were already in the insurance space, you're already doing that business, it sounds like, okay, you're doing this day in, day out, life insurance. Was it immediate that you were saying, yep, okay, now that I've done all the research and the vetting that I'm going to do, I know that I both want to do this personally in my life, and I want to immediately begin sharing, the idea that other people, and I want to be able to help them. Did that happen simultaneously then?
Pretty much. I was reluctant at first to share it very much. So I have a tendency to want to know too much before I go out there, but then once I get out there, I'm okay with it. But it but there wasn't just this black and white turn off this insurance business and turn on the switch of IBC and start that one. Um, that's going to be and still is a work in process to go 100% IBC. To be honest with you, the I need to get more clients going on my IBC side, but also on the other side where I'm still helping people, that helps pay the bills and help people at the same time. So it hadn't been just a black and white transition.
All right, let me cut in right here real quick. Did y'all hear that, ladies and gentlemen? Me and Mark can still work with more people. We're not tapped out. We're not maxed out. We can help more folks. All right, keep going.
Right. That's a great way to put it. So I'm still helping people. I've narrowed my focus a little bit on who I'm helping because you just can't do everything for everybody. So I have narrowed that focus for sure. But one of my biggest challenges in the business is to figure out the balance of time involved. You know, I want to do both every week, some of both the regular life insurance side and the infinite banking. If I binge and do all infinite banking one week, well, my pipeline dries up on my regular business, on the regular life insurance. So a time balance between the two businesses, because they frankly don't overlap very often. And part of that's just the way it's been presented, where I get my clients from, you know. So there's not a lot of overlap there. Occasionally, I will go have an infinite banking conversation uh, with what started out as a regular life insurance client, but not too often, you know. And that may change. That may get better as I get stronger in my presentations.
Sure. Well, we always want to be working on ourselves and perfecting ourselves and advancing, how we convey the idea. That right there in and of itself is kind of as simple and as dynamic as the IBC itself. The infinite banking concept is as simple as you becoming your own banker. It is as simple as that, right? In that sentence, is it? And yet, here we are talking about a book and talking about a think tank and talking about friends that have applied it and us that have applied it and podcasts and other books. And so you can get as dynamic as you want with the infinite banking concept as possible. And that I'm just drawing a parallel between, yes, the insurance world is such a big world. So it could just be as simple as when you see an opportunity to plant the seed of exposing someone else to, hey, you could become your own banker. But that's also a very dynamic interaction as well. Okay, you got me thinking about so many things about just where you're at. You've gone through the commendable effort of becoming an authorized IBC practitioner. You're showing up at events. You're part of an IBC mastermind that I'm in, and I know that you participate there, and I love it when you gave a great talk the other day, actually, for everybody at that table, and I really appreciated that. So I know, what do I want to say here? I love your story. I love hearing where you've been and more about where you're at, and it just makes me excited about future conversations as well. All right, so was there any one thing, I want to go back to something that I wrote down that you said earlier. At the very beginning, when you were exposed to infinite banking, you had this knee-jerk reaction of, it's smoke and mirrors, that can't be right. Can you think of anything particular that gave you that knee-jerk reaction of, that can't be right? That's smoke and mirrors.
Sure. Well, I would say it like this. It just, on the surface, listening to some of these guys do podcasts and whatnot, not so much the book, but just listening to people, because everybody's got a different personality, right? And so some may even come across a little bit that way. Not a lot, not the legit guys, but it just kind of felt too good to be true. And I was like everybody else, so bought into the system that it was it was the paradigm shift that I had a trouble with, you know, rethinking my thinking was my first issue. It really was. And it was just something that I had to work into. I didn't have a particular light bulb moment where I said, oh, now I get it. I mean, I might have had a few little light bulb moments, but no overarching, oh, now I get the whole concept. It's been a bit by bit gradual process for me to get it. And I think some of that is from watching people give testimony about how they use the system. I like hands-on. I actually like looking at illustrations that show numbers. Some people say don't show the illustrations, but I love them because they're tangible. Now, I understand they're not 100% correct and they're a snapshot in time, but they are tangible. It's something I can get my head around. I believe strongly in a concept called Maya, most advanced yet acceptable. It's a great TED talk on YouTube. I can't remember the guy's name, but he says, as we're presenting ideas to someone, it can't be outside of who they already are. That you want to present the most advanced concept you can, which is IBC in this case, but yet it has to be acceptable so that they can at least get their head around level one. Okay, so most advanced yet acceptable. So I go into it with this theory. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel for anybody. Nobody likes to have their wheels taken away or be told they've been doing it wrong all this time. My goal, instead of reinventing the wheel, is to make the wheel more round. And I believe that's what IBC does for people's financial pictures.
So do this for me, Mark, if you would. This is a question that just occurred to me as you were saying some of that. So you found infinite banking in your 60s. You'll come across this, you already have. I have as well. Folks are turned on to this idea, like you and I were, and they'll say, but I this with my health, but I that with my background, but I this with, so different things. So just if you would, speak to that particular person who is turned on to this idea and they're considering it, they're vetting it, they're reading the book or they're listening to us. What would you say to somebody who's wondering, am I showing up too late to the party?
Yeah, and that's a really valid point because I feel like